What's good, guys? It's Jalen, and we're here with another video. Of course, we're going to have the background noises. We cannot have a video without them. So, this video comes from a discussion that I had with a coworker. I've actually talked about this coworker before in previous videos. I'm cool with them. And we had a discussion because we had changed locations and we were speaking about our experience at the old location and our experience now at the new location and how they compare and contrast. And we were talking about how the old environment at which we worked at was better than the new one, right? Now, the thing that you have to understand about this discussion is that we are not talking about like task wise, because task wise our new environment is stupid easy compared to our old environment. What we're talking about is community and the setup of the old setting versus the new setting, right? So in our old setting, we had essentially set up a community, right? Because it was there for quite a while, and the community was set up. I mean, customers would interact with us. They'd send us stuff. Like they'd see that we were out taking donations or whatever. They'd give us water, this, that, or the third. It was a really good environment, and of course you had your toxic customers and toxic, just people that came through, but that just added to the authenticity of the environment of which you were in. And you didn't really have a whole lot of administration going on. The only, the highest admin, the highest person, of staff, like at the place was, of course, the manager. So it was a real good community that we had set up. And we were talking about how the community that we had set up at the old spot made that spot way better than the new spot, because at the new spot, of course, like we're like right next to administration, which our administration is cool. We have some really chill members in our administration, so it's not really bad. But I'm going to go over like the drawbacks of administration that make what we're going through now not as good as what we had in the past. So when we're talking about this discussion was way more philosophical than I guess we both imagined at the time. Like when I got through with the conversation, it wasn't until I had got in the car and clocked out when I really thought about what the conversation that we had really meant and how relevant it really was. Because what we were discussing, even though it was in the guise of, a shift in work environments, what it really was, what it really implied, or what it could have meant in the grand scheme of things, was the shift that we're seeing in society from a society that has very high amounts of connectivity, of resonance, and of relevance, versus a society that is very administrative, that has varying speeds when it comes to how information is transferred to you, and also a society that is very distant from your dynamics, from what you got going on, versus what the structures of the society actually has going on, right? Because let's look at, again, going back to the work thing, right? With the work, there is no, when it comes down to connectivity, there's high amounts of connectivity, right? You're connected to the coworkers, you're connected to the employees, I said coworkers and employees, like the customers, right? Because like, the customers that go to that store are usually regular customers that go there every week to see what's going on. And with the speed of information is in such a way to where you can adapt to it, because information is being processed in real time. If something happens in the store, then I'm already there. If something's going on with me, then, you know, my coworkers can see it, and um, my coworkers can address it, and it can be solved right then and there. Very rarely do problems ever get to a point to where admin has to like step in. Usually we're able to fix the problems right there on the spot. Now, I'm not going to say any names, but there are some people that, wanted to bring admin into situations where admin did not have to be in situations. But in most cases, um, we solved our own problems, and we kept the store running, and everything was cool and it was straight. Versus in our new setting, information isn't really like that. You have this very long chain where this long chain makes it to where information has more and more of an ambiguity on how it's being processed and how it's being analyzed, to the point to where you don't know when it's going to come back to you, and you don't know in what manner it's going to come back to you. Also, there's different sectors of the space. So you have your space, and then you have an admin space. And with that, you have two areas in one spot, and you're not able to understand the other area in a setting because they operate under different rules than you do. Now, everybody plays fair when it comes down to the rules. Admin, they have their protocols, we have our protocols. But, with differing protocols, there's the fact that sometimes your protocols and how you see things are going to conflict with the protocols that the other party has. So there's that problem. Also, you can never be for sure if everything is going how it's supposed to in both parties, mine and theirs, because we're not members of, that particular party. We're members of our own. Versus with our old setting, we're all processing associates. We're all on the same team. And when it comes down to the managers, they hang out with us more than they hang out with admin. So they're on our team too. And with how hectic things can be at the spot, sometimes you find that you're having to do tasks along with us, even if you are a manager. So everybody is functioning under the same rules for the most part at our old spot. So everything, that everything is fair, right? Because we're all on the same team. Versus in our new spot, you're not necessarily knowing if everybody's playing by the rules fairly. Not to say that there are people that aren't, because it can go both ways. Admin, admin, they probably won't be able to tell if, we're, working unfairly, but on the other hand, we're not able to tell if admin is doing their duties unfairly, because there's that barrier and there's that distance. And then you gotta look at, okay, it's admin. So, like I said, with the chain of command and the information delays, and also the, with information delays and the speed in which information comes down, you don't know how the system is going to be affected. you know? And, I'm going to move on to the third point here. When it comes down to relevance, it's differing parties. So the amount of concern is never going to be, the amount of concern is never going to be how it should be. You know, processing associates can have a high level of concern amongst each other because their tasks are interrelated in a way to where the activity and the productivity of one party is going to influence another party. But when you're in like different sectors, it doesn't necessarily matter because the productivity and the activity doesn't affect the parties to the degree that it really would in the previous case, because again there's that distance. So we've gone over connectivity, we've gone over relevance, and when I'm talking about resonance, I'm really saying that you know everybody is not feeling the exact same emotions and everybody's not experiencing the same scenarios because everybody's in different places. That's all I mean by resonance. So we've gone over these three things. Now I was going over, and I said that this relates to society when you really look at it because, in the past when you had communities, tribal communities or whatever, like for me, wanting to be a therapist, and having trouble currently, but wanting to be a therapist in a tribal community, you have the shaman or whatever, or even like in the most modern conception, you have like the town doctor or the town physician or whatever. The town doctor and the shaman are going to have a high feeling of resonance and a high feeling of relevance with the community that they're a part of, because not only did they grow up and build alongside the system of the community, they also have a high amount of resonance within the system and the community because the impacts that the system goes through, they've gone through themselves because they are a part of that community. If a plague hits, it's going to threaten your life. You feel me? If the tribe and the community is eating good and is going through prosperity, you're going through prosperity too. And also you've grown up with these people. So, you feel like the object relations that you have with the community at large have a significance on who you are as a person. They inform you about yourself. The connections that you have with the community, inform you about who you are and who you should be. There's no distance and there's no feeling of isolation and alienation with the world around you, with the case of the town doctor and the case of the shaman when he's doing his thing in the community. However, with the modern, way of the world, there is alienation, there is isolation, and there is questioning of trust. Because with most medical boards or with most boards within the helping profession, you have ethics. So you got to put into question, okay, I'm coming in, I don't know this person. And not only do I not know this person, they're connected to a party that I have no knowledge of. What's going to happen? Because they have an ethics that they have to follow. Okay, that's one feeling of alienation, isolation. You also have alienation and isolation because helping professions have set philosophies, right? So in the past, we were mechanistic, and now we're transforming into a multicultural perspective. So, with philosophy and perspective, you got to take into consideration that they're going to be operating under a multicultural perspective, but they're not going to be operating under a perspective of what's actually going on within the locality of, they're not going to be operating under the philosophy of the origin of place that they're in. They're going to be operating under the philosophy of the institution that they are a part of. Okay. Now, of course, institutions, specifically like within the helping profession, they try and mend this with the importance of community involvement. But again, community involvement is going to be based around the ethics and the philosophies that I've just mentioned. So, and again, like with ethics and philosophy, you have that chain of command. Who is imposing the ethics? Who created the philosophies? Who are their superiors? At some point, people don't start to know, and at some point, the chain of command is so high that you can't really change it. I talked about that in my what was it like? It was in my Deus Ex and Metal Gear Solid video. So if you want to get more into that thought, then you can look at that video. So there's this alienation, and there's this distance in the structures that influence our life that feel like shouldn't be there. If institutions and structures have these high amounts of control over our individual lives, then we should have an innate and we should have an intimate knowledge of these institutions. And we should also have intimate connections and an intimate relay with the structures as well, to feel like that they have information about us as to what we should be doing, and we have resources within us to dictate how we should act towards them. But that isn't necessarily the case, because there are boundaries, and there are reaches of power that entities within a hierarchy have, that are maintained by those boundaries and by that secrecy. So you're always going to have that. You're always going to have that alienation and that isolation. So it just that discussion had me thinking like that. It was a very good conversation, but it was a good conversation that had me thinking about even greater ideas. But then again, that's all that we talked about, so that's the end of the video. So it's your boy signing out. Peace.